Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where our job is to help you build visibility, professional credibility, and connection with your ideal client by putting the human at the center of innovative marketing, so you can build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship with your ideal clients. I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm honored that you're here with me. If you haven't joined our wonderful marketing transformation community yet, go to innovabiz.co and collect your free gift as well. Do subscribe to the show and also leave a review because it helps others find us. Let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
Personal brand isn't what you do. And really, nobody hires you for what you do. They hire you because of how you do it. So, figuring out what your values are, figuring out how you do the thing you do, and the reason why people come back to you again and again to do it, these are the foundations of your personal brand in many ways.
Welcome back to another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. If you haven't yet listened to my recent conversations with Neil Butler of Untypical and with Marcel McCarthy of 1-2, then do check them out. But wait until you've listened to today's conversation, because I'm really excited today to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest Tamara Glick, who describes herself as an evil genius and mastermind at two very specific things: developing personal brands and unique style for highly visible leaders that raises their profiles, represents their values, and promotes their perspective with confidence, and helping lifestyle brands build cult-like followings so that they can take their signature offering from sampled to staple with the sales to match. Tamara works with founders, executives, and highly visible thought leaders, as well as growth stage brands around the globe to craft distinctive, authentic, professional brand strategies with clarity, relevance, and sophistication. In our discussion today, Tamara talked to me about showing up as a personal brand in a human way. We talked about how to show up authentically in the virtual space, so online, and we talked about building personal leadership. Without further ado, then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Tamara Glick. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome today to the InnovaBuzz podcast, all the way from Toronto in Canada, Tamara Glick, who is an entrepreneur, a business owner, and she has a background in marketing, advertising, and in personal branding and style. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Tamara. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Christina Torres, who was our guest on episode 307 of the InnovaBuzz podcast, suggested that we have a chat with you on the InnovaBuzz podcast. So big shout out to Christina.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm really excited to dig into this because I know you've got a really interesting background. You kind of started off in advertising, went into fashion consulting and writing copy, and now you are a personal brand consultant. But one of your areas of focus that we were just having a chat about before we started recording is in showing up on camera, which is particularly relevant these days with everybody transitioning to work from home, even if only temporarily, but certainly something that presents new challenges for people that aren't used to working remotely. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that. But before we get on to some of those things, tell us a little bit about that journey from style consultant, or from advertising to fashion to style consultant.
Oh, sure. It's a really checkered past. I began my career in fashion retail, right out of school, even in my younger years. And I thought that what I could do after doing my undergrad in a super employable field of English and women's studies, I thought the most logical next step would be to do something like an MBA. And so I applied to do my MBA actually when I was living in Australia. And I applied to do my degree at home in Canada and received my acceptance. And unfortunately couldn't defer. So I had to move home again. When I was there, I thought, the most creative thing that I can do with a business degree is to go into advertising. Now, at the time, that was not one of the two most popular flavors of Kool-Aid. So, really, a person doing their MBA at that stage, you'd go into finance, you'd go into consulting, maybe you'd go into corporate marketing. Those were really the areas that were the main foci. And so when I would ask at the career center, how do I get myself together for interviews or for networking in the advertising industry, they gave me some really interesting answers. And as a person with a fashion background, I thought, well, this doesn't sound right, but it's the best business school in the country. And surely they know from business. So I relied on that expertise. And I went into a mock interview with my next door neighbor. And she had done 20 years already of her career in advertising, had a really good feel for the industry, and took one look at me and said, "What the heck is this?" I had shown up in a black skirt suit and a French twist and pearl earrings and pantyhose, like the whole corporate thing. And we had this wonderful conversation about knowing your audience, understanding your field, knowing how you fit in to the landscape overall. And really what dawned on me was this is about branding. This isn't about clothes. It's not about fashion. And fashion isn't frivolous, it's a marketing tool. And so
Mm.
when I started thinking about it in that context, and I went back to my branding classes at school and I thought, well, if somebody's going to buy this product versus that product, what's the impression that they get that helps them make that buying decision? A lot of it came down to the messages that you put out there. And a lot of those messages are visual messages. So I changed my strategy and found I had a lot more success getting into the areas of business that I was comfortable and interested in. And people started to ask me about creativity in that area. I became really, really interested in the art and science of image consulting. Moonlighted as an image consulting, I actually did my image consulting certification while I was working full time in the advertising industry and started doing that kind of on the side as my side hustle. And then when 2008 and 9 hit and all the marketers lost their job, I thought, okay, well, you've got two choices here, Glick. You can go and find another RJ, real job, with all of the rest of the
Mm.
marketers who've lost their current roles,
Yeah.
or you can really give this a try and see how this works out. I mean, there's always going to be another marketing job. So that's when I decided I was really going to commit to my business and moved into that full time. So going from that style element, which I still believe is extremely important to a person's self expression and personal brand, into communication from a words perspective, I had already been doing that. I had already been in a persuasion field for the duration of my corporate career on both the agency side and on the corporate marketing side. And it became a very natural thing to say, we need to persuade in both areas, especially if you have a personal brand. If you are your brand, then
Mm.
persuasion both in words and in what you wear are important. So at this point, I'm now a personal brand strategist, both written and worn.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because you bring everything together around brand because brand is like to me, the old style theory that they probably still teach it in business school is that the brand is the logo, the brand is so they talk about image as a corporate image, but there's no connection between the brand is have what you live every day, and and I like what you touched on very early, where, when you showed up in the dark pantsuit and, stockings or pantyhose, and the what was expected in the corporate world of a professional woman, that how she would dress, and that you felt that that was not you, that that was uncomfortable. So I think, first of all, having the self-awareness to project yourself out there as you are is part of the brand. And then also feeling comfortable in what you're actually wearing. So if you're wearing something that is expected of you, but you're actually not comfortable in that, like I used to have to wear a tie, or it was kind of the expected thing to wear a tie back in the corporate world. And at some point I decided, you know what, I'm going to just not wear a tie.
Mhm.
And like I got a few funny looks initially, and then people just decided that was what I was. That was how I was going to show up. And then I started wearing, I thought, well, actually, without a tie, I don't need single colored shirts. I can start wearing different colored shirts. So I started wearing some shirts that I really like wearing. And it makes a huge difference in just the way you feel yourself.
It really does. And, and again, this is a tool. When we adorn ourselves, we see ourselves in different ways. Not only that, other people receive us in different ways. So, this is really, again, it goes back to this can be a marketing tool, and it is an expression of yourself. It is what a person can come to expect of you when they encounter you, ideally across any interaction that they have with you. And if that isn't branding, well, I just don't know what it is.
Mm.
So, we really are, when we think about the way that we make judgments, we don't like to think that we're making judgments based on the physical. And I can appreciate that. We want to intellectualize ourselves away from that because we can. The reality is that as human animals, we make a lot of decisions really, really quickly in milliseconds, nanoseconds, right? When you think about a book like Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, he
Mm.
talks a lot about that, right? Thin slicing data and what that means to our decision making process. And what it does mean is that whenever we encounter someone or something, a situation or an individual, we use all of the store of information that we've collected throughout the entirety of our lives to make a really quick snap decision about what we have in front of us now. And the interesting thing about that is not only how quick that happens, but also that it's really, really hard to change our minds after we've
Mm.
formulated that first opinion because we don't want to prove ourselves wrong.
Yeah.
So if I think about that and I think about being an innovator, being a leader, then if I can assist my audience in picking up cues that I want them to pick up, to help them see me for the qualities that I bring to my work or to the thought or to the philosophy that I have, wouldn't I want to take advantage of that?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I was just thinking as you're saying that, because one of the things I was reflecting on, and I think it was an article you wrote about first impressions, that I often jump to conclusions when I first meet someone and have that first impression, and then I correct myself. Oh, well, I don't. I I get curious and think, well, what am I missing here? Why am I jumping to conclusions? And you shouldn't really judge a book by its cover, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And probably 8 times out of 10, something happens down the track, and I reflect back on that first impression, and I thought, damn it, I was right. Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't trust that initial instinct, because I thought, you shouldn't really judge just based on limited information on that first instinct, and yet it can give you lots of clues if we're kind of really aware of it. And so that's the one thing. The second thing I think that struck me from what you were saying is that we shouldn't use this to manipulate people, right? It's not. I mean, the manipulation kind of thing to me is if you're turning up in a corporate suit that is not your normal clothing that you would wear. You're turning up because you think that's expected. Perhaps it is expected, but that's putting on a costume, if you like. It's playing a role that's not you.
That's a really interesting perspective. And yeah, I mean words like control, manipulation, when it comes to perception, they can feel very negative in nature. And I would want to stress that that's not what we're talking about it as
Mm.
well. What I think is important, though, is that we recognize it isn't always just about us. It is about understanding context. Like I was explaining in that job
Mm.
interview scenario, I was dressed for the wrong context. And
Yeah.
that wouldn't appear trustworthy. It would seem like I didn't understand the etiquette of the environment. And so that's the other thing that I think is really important when we talk about dress or we talk about personal branding and how we show up. There is not just us and how we want to be, because some people might be very comfortable in their Sunday gardening clothes all the
Mm.
time. But you know that you're not going to
That's
show
it.
up to an important meeting in that ultimate comfort
Mm.
zone, right? There's an etiquette to the environment or to the setting that you're in. And I really want people to think not just about, their essence, their energy, but also the end goal. What are we aiming to achieve?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's to me, it's communication. It's all part of communication. And if your communication, if you're not getting the result that you're aiming to achieve, if you're not getting the message across that you're aiming to get across, then it's up to you. It's really the communication failure is on my side. If I'm trying to get a message across to you and you don't get it, the communication gap is my responsibility. It's on my side. So if that's changed my visual appearance, if that's changed the words I use, if that's changed the medium I use to connect with you, then I've got to do those things in order to get my message across and achieve the goal I want to achieve. And all of that, of course, in the service of the person I'm giving the message to.
Brilliant. Exactly. We wouldn't have any qualms about realizing that the arguments we make on a sales page didn't work if we didn't convert the way that we thought we were going to, right?
Mm.
And we would say, okay, well, if we're going to go and study that sales page, we'll find that if we tweak a few things or we adjust the language or the order, then we might get better results. And the same
Mm.
can be true about any element of your personal brand. It's refining for the ultimate goal, which is to communicate effectively with your audience.
Mm. Yeah, I love it. Communicating effectively with your audience. All right. So we've heard sort of why personal branding is so important because it's kind of part of the whole communication exercise. And particularly if, let's say, I'm the voice or the face of my business, which is a lot of times in small business is the case that the founder or the owner is the face of the business. So the personal brand of that person is really vital to the whole success of the business. How does it play out in a bigger organization in a corporate world?
I think you made a couple of really good points when you were talking about how you adjusted your mode of dress
Hmm.
over the years. Um, you know, Over the course of the past 20 years, we've really seen a shift in corporate dress code and expectation. Kind of gone are the days of formal corporate dress where it was very much about the etiquette of the situation over the personality or persona of the individual, right? And then we started to see that business casual trend happen. And so
Hmm.
people got more and more creative and more casual as the years went on. The past couple of years, we've actually seen a bit of a retraction in true business casual in the corporate world, but a completely different world has cropped up over the past 8 to 10 years, and that's the digital entrepreneurial world. Where there are no rules, like in Greece, the rules are there are no rules.
Yeah.
We've seen a couple of divergences in the expectation of dress. And as we've come into the time frame we are in right now, where regardless of whether or not you work in an office, generally speaking, or at home, generally speaking, or remotely, generally speaking, we are all in this new era of figuring out what the etiquette is. So, we used to have this very sort of staunch, we need to dress this way, that was very formulaic, that really started to go by the wayside. And as you move more to the casual or creative end of the scale and away from the formal or corporate end of the scale, you get more and more personality opportunities injected into your mode of dress. And now we're at this stage where everybody is like, do I wear pants? Do I not wear pants? Like, what do I do? Do I take that news anchor approach? And we're seeing actual news anchors not wearing pants and getting caught on screen. So, we're at this stage now where I think part of the true leadership being shown is mastering how to work remotely and be comfortable and professional at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it reminded me of a story someone was telling me the other day. She works for one of the major banking companies in Australia, so multi-billion-dollar company that's just been. She's in the insurance arm, and it's just been acquired by a bigger company. So hundreds of billions of dollars revenue company, and the CEO of that company addressed all the employees, so all the new employees of the business that they'd acquired, um, dressed in a hoodie, sitting on his bed in his bedroom at home, and
Ow.
and I thought, that's an interesting first impression to project to a new company you've just acquired.
Yeah, it really is. And interesting that you say that. A couple of reasons. A, because I have clients who've worked in the big banks here in Canada as well. And when they've changed their dress codes from formal corporate to smart casual or business professional, and they've been building their careers over decades in suits as a signature. And
Mm,
that's where they found their power. That's where they found their, the expectation of their persona in the work world. And then they had to change all of that, and it felt like taking off armor.
yeah.
It felt like you were really stripping them of something that they relied on, as a part of their persona, as a part of their personal brand. So finding new ways to create the feeling of that without actually wearing the same garment as they had
Mm,
before, because they were in the position of leadership to usher in this change. It was a really interesting challenge. But to your point, with everybody being at home, there has been a tremendous grace period, which I think is really important to acknowledge. And I wouldn't have wanted that any other way for people. We all needed to deal with a lot of unknowns overnight, very quickly, without preparation, and not knowing how long it would last. So I can certainly imagine that trying to adjust to that new work environment at home, having potentially your children, your spouse, your pets in
mm,
in a way that you never anticipated you'd have to balance. There's only so much bandwidth. And so
mm,
I'm really appreciative of the amount of grace everyone in the world has had for one another during this adjustment. At the same time, if you are in a position of leadership like this gentleman was, my expectation is you continue to take that with the same level of privilege and respect that you would have in person. Maybe he appears in a hoodie all the time.
yeah.
I have thoughts and feelings around that. There is one Zuckerberg, and there is one
Mm,
Vaynerchuk. We are not all Zuckerbergs
mm,
and
that's
Vaynerchuk,
right.
right? And we can't pull that off. We need to understand that. But that's a different conversation. Pretend he shows up in a hoodie all the time. The difference would be that he would have a building that would support him, because the
Mm,
decor, the furniture, the expectation of the elevation of where they would naturally meet one another in the office would be preset.
mm,
Now that we're working from home, none of that is preset. We now have the opportunity to influence our audience, no matter who they are. It could be one on one, it could be greeting an entire new complement of staff, it could be an audience of listeners, it could be a virtual stage. But we now have the opportunity to affect the impression we provide from top to bottom, whether it's on our person or supporting our person in the background. I think that's a huge area of opportunity because so many people are doing exactly what this gentleman did and forgetting the level of intimacy that they
Mm,
are inviting when they appear in their bedroom, or if they're
yeah.
like literally on their bed or smooshed on the couch, and camera angles change, and there's a lot to
Mm.
think about that we've never had to think about before.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we were having a chat earlier before we started recording about how do you show up on camera as vibrant and as authentic as you are in real life. So I do want to explore that some more, but you've triggered something there for me. And one of my pet peeves on Zoom meetings in particular is people playing with the virtual backgrounds, and they'll switch virtual backgrounds during the meeting because they decide, oh, that one's a bit boring, I might switch to a different one. And the worst ones are, I was on a Toastmasters meeting recently, and there was one participant there had this virtual background, and I for a few minutes I thought, who's this other person walking across? I didn't realize they had another. So it was a lady. I thought, I didn't know they had another woman living with them. Who is that person? And then I realized that was a video background, and this person just kept walking across and walking across every 30 seconds or so. This person would walk across exactly
Oh
the
my
same, and it was just so distracting.
It is so distracting. And most people who use a virtual background do it because they don't want to introduce people to their home. They don't feel that they've got a space in which they feel confident. So, you can fake it no matter where you are. You could be taking this call in your car, or you could be sitting at a cafe and throw up this virtual background and nobody will know. The problem is everybody knows.
Hmm.
And that becomes a problem as well because it is so distracting and hilarious that that person would choose something that it's like a cuckoo clock. They just keep
Yeah,
going and
that's
going,
right.
right?
Hmm.
And it's on a very noticeable loop.
Hmm.
So you start becoming distracted. You're waiting and you're counting the seconds. Like, is it a 30 second? Is it a 15? I
Hmm.
think I'll wait and test. Are you hearing anything that that person is saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
at
and
all.
interestingly, she was one of the speakers. So she did a speech with this background running, and I
Oh
thought,
my
oh wow,
goodness.
that's you know,
So
that would be the first thing to improve that speech out of sight.
absolutely. And I also find, a lot of people will say, well, if I need to fix this, if I just want to make sure that people aren't judging my background, so I will either use a virtual background and I'll just make it a plain color and put the logo on it,
Mm,
or I'll stand in front of a plain beige wall and that will take care of anything. However, it's kind of like, I quote movies a lot, but it reminds me of Dirty Dancing when they're playing golf and the dad says to the mom, "You're overcorrecting, Marge." It's an overcorrection.
mm,
I understand where it's coming from, the intention that it's coming from, but you end up with two things. One, it if you're using that kind of a virtual background where it's a solid color or it's like space or a different environment or it has just a major logo on the background, you have removed the field of vision or the depth to your
mm,
screen. And when you are on a 13-inch screen, it's a very concentrated place for your audience to view. Zoom fatigue, that's a real thing. It's
mm,
exhausting for the brain and for the eyes to have to focus in on a narrow field with only one thing of interest to look at, you. It's exhausting because the eye is concentrating so hard the brain gets tired. Alternatively, standing against a beige wall, the same kind of thing happens, but you end up with this kind of like hostage video look where the
yeah,
problem is there's no context.
yeah,
We
you're missing
don't
the
know where
number
you
across the
are.
front, or yeah.
Yeah, you're just waiting, like, please hold up a newspaper with today's
Mm,
date. I just want to make sure that this isn't pre-recorded and you're okay, right? We want to provide context and a sense of depth so that people have the ability to allow their eye to roam a little bit when they're watching you on screen, but not get distracted by clutter in the background. It's a fairly fine balance, but there
mm,
are ways to do this that inevitably result in a beautiful backdrop and a place where you can feel confident to work from.
mm. So what are some tips that you have for us in that regard?
So, one of the things that I want you to know is that no matter what kind of living space you have, you can create a great work from home video call space. I'm coming to you live right now from my cloffice, which is my closet office. It's a 4 by 6 foot room. In my flat. I live in a 1 bedroom flat in the middle of Toronto. So, space is always at a premium when you're in the middle of the city. But if I can do a space that is impressive to look at and comfortable to sit in, I know that anyone can. And I've helped people in all kinds of different living situations to achieve that. The other thing that I would want you to know is you can control or manipulate in the very best ways possible the image that you project on camera. And a lot of that has to do with either what is around you or what is on you. But the third and probably the most important element is the tech that supports you. And it's something that I call the TV trifecta. This is stuff you never had to learn. Why would you
Mm.
ever need to know this? No matter what your function at work is, unless you are in TV or you were the president of the AV club, you didn't know any of this stuff. So we're talking about your lighting, your sound quality, and your video quality, all of which can make a huge and positive impact on the way you come forward on screen, or they can unintentionally erode your personal brand on screen. And we don't want that to happen.
Mm. So talk to us a little bit about some of those things. I mean, as a hobby photographer from way back, I'm on top and aware of some of those things, in particular the lighting one. And I always think, wow, turn the camera around the other way and get on the other side, where people have got their backs to a window that's where the sun's streaming into the window and all you see is a dark shadow.
Yeah. So, natural lighting is always the first and best choice, because we all look best in natural lighting.
Mm.
We really do. If you have a choice, my preference is that you sit with your face facing a north facing window, alternatively, a south facing window. Why? Because the exposure to light on both of those views will be the most even throughout the day. So if you
Mm.
had a call in the morning or if you had a call in the afternoon, the changes to lighting won't be particularly drastic. If you're sitting at a window that has a west or an eastern facing exposure, you already know if it's a western facing exposure, it will be probably quite nice in the morning, but it will be very strong and feel very hot. Hot personally, but also hot on the screen. It will be
Mm.
overly lit, overexposed in the afternoon. And the opposite will be true if you have an east facing window where things will feel very hot, very blown out in the morning, but a little dimmer, a little bit more comfortable in the afternoon, depending on the positioning of your windows and of the sun. So, barring that, if you can't have that, or if you do have an east or a west facing window, then we want to supplement your lighting. So this is all the lighting part is really important because just like you said, a lot of people they'll sit down somewhere, the light will be behind them, and that results in a silhouetted figure. Has anybody ever wanted to do business with a shady figure?
Yeah.
It's just not a good look, right? Like
Mm.
you naturally have questions about your ability to trust that person if you can't really see them. And this all comes back again, personal branding. What are we trying to achieve? We want you to be authentically yourself, genuinely available so that people can know how to know, like, and trust you. That's what this is about. So clarity in your lighting, clarity in your audio, clarity in your video, that all allows people to see you for real on screen and be able to know, like, and trust you subconsciously without you having to do anything in particular other than allow them that opportunity.
Mm. Yeah. That's great advice. And I'm standing here in front of my west facing window early in the morning on a cloudy day, which is ideal lighting.
Yes,
But
it
I
is.
am fully aware the setting sun when it's a clear day is really a challenge for me if I'm doing something in the afternoon. So I
Mhm.
try to do all my video recordings in the morning because
That
this is
makes
my
good sense.
this is my station. But I do have a set of rather extensive light banks here that reflect off the ceiling and do all kinds of lighting. So have the setup optimized for that. As I say, I've having been in photography and having in the very early days learnt to not photograph into the light, or if you do, you have to pay particular attention to how you expose the scene and do a lot of tricks. So that comes naturally to me. But a lot of people don't understand that idea that if these video cameras are just doing an average of the total light. And so if
Right.
there's a bright light behind you, you're going to be dark.
Exactly. And I think also, it's important to share that you don't have to have an extensive or an expensive
Mm,
lighting gear setup. Great if you do, great if you have the space for it. Why not utilize it? And for what you do, you need it. Most people, though, they may not need it. When I deliver my work from home masterclass, which is something that talks very much about how to set up your home office space so that you are delivering the clearest image that you can as a leader in your industry, and then also talks about how to do that on your body, so styling your space and styling your body. We talk a lot about how camera can work to your advantage, how to set up lighting, all with things that are not very expensive at
mm,
all but make a really big difference. So it's really not necessarily about the size of the investment so much as it is the quality of the investment that you make for the space that you're in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in terms of, well, you talked about pick a north-facing window and set yourself up on that. That assumes you have the space to be able to do that, but the cost is essentially nothing.
Right.
And yeah, and even if you need to have some lighting, there are some very low cost. Under $100, under $50, I've even seen little
Mhm.
ring lights that can sit behind the camera that give you a really wonderful light.
Yeah, there's all kinds of options. And of course, then you need to test things out. And this is stuff,
Hmm.
again, why would you ever know this? So a lot of people will set up a ring light because they're like, oh, everybody and their sister has a ring light. That's what
Ring
I need.
light, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other options as well, particularly if you are someone who wears glasses. Ring
Mm.
lights can be really detrimental because
Not
then you think,
not
okay, I've
good.
got the ring light, it's great. But what you're not realizing is that all your viewer can see if you're wearing glasses are the ring of light in your
Yep.
glasses. And so you don't see the person's eyes. And if you can't see the person's eyes, how can you trust them?
Mm.
So we
Yeah.
do want to talk about the finer points of how to set up your work from home space so that you've got all the right stuff, but you're using it properly as well.
Mm. Yeah, there's lots of little things that um I've as I say, as a photographer, I've made all those mistakes in the past and seen that, and you learn these little tips and tricks. But yes, that's right. The ring light is not good for me in particular with wearing the glasses.
Yeah, there are ways that we can use it. It just takes a little bit more effort and more experimentation.
Hmm. All right. Now, we did sort of touch on it earlier and we talked about it before we started recording. That's how to go on camera, because a lot of people now working from home hadn't been doing that before. They have a persona that comes across really well on stage, in a live workshop, in a live interaction one-on-one when they meet people, and now suddenly they're going online. So how do they take that persona and project it the same way online? Because I know from me personally,
Mhm.
particularly if I'm recording a video with nobody else there, I'm recording a video that I'm going to post on my website, I'm going to post on social media, and there's nobody else there. And I really struggle because I find it really challenging to get out of my head and imagine that audience in front of me and appear as I would if there was that audience in front of me. So, how do we kind of make that transition?
It's so interesting you say that because so many people, when they learn to become a great speaker or they learn to become a compelling presenter, some of the coaching advice is to picture one person in the room.
Hmm.
just one person in the room as opposed to all the people in the room that you're exchanging energy with, which is part of the beauty and part of the fun, I think, of being
Mm.
on stage or being a presenter to an audience. I love that energy exchange. And it can feel very awkward if you are alone in your home presenting to what you imagine is a stage of an audience of millions, right?
Mm.
And there's really no one there but the cyclops eye of your camera. And so, the cyclops eye of your camera is your best friend in this situation. And I know that sounds really weird because you feel like it's not even a responsive robot. Like it's not even Alexa, at least
Mm.
Alexa responds,
Yeah,
but this
yeah.
isn't going to respond. So there's a lot of things that I want people to remember. And I think this is really where you can innovate your speaking and you're presenting. If you are a thought leader and you're delivering often, but now you are delivering from home, you can really innovate the way that you come to an engagement by learning how to do a few of these things. For example, setting up your space appropriately so that it is interesting, comfortable, reflects your brand, clothing yourself appropriately for your brand and for the audience. I think that some of the more interesting things as well are when we learn how to present, we learn to stand up, walk around, get the energy flowing, move the chi up. And when you are presenting on camera at home, you need to be able to move the energy up without the grand movements.
Mm.
Again, you have 13 inches, generally speaking. You might get somebody who's got a larger monitor than that, but most people have a laptop that's between 13 and 16 inches large, right? And so that is the amount of space that you're coming to them through. It's a concentrated area. I like to say it's kind of like the genie in Aladdin, right?
Mm.
Amazing, huge powers, itty bitty living space. And you have to be able to create that feeling of stupendous power in this tiny, tiny 13 to 16-inch space. And that means being really cognizant of how you use your body. So when people learn to present live, they learn obviously to do it standing up and to walk, right? Cover the stage, look at different people in the audience, raise your energy, bring the chi, and a lot of that happens from movement. However, when you're presenting on screen or on video, because you have such a small amount of space that you can cover, I actually prefer if people can learn how to raise that energy when they're sitting. This takes more practice as well, right? Like you don't have the benefit of that full body motion or movement to raise your energy or to harness that energy. Instead, what you need to do is really bring it from like your sitting bones all the way up through the diaphragm and out. So, it's really important to think about that 13 to 16-inch space and to know that the way that you're coming through on camera, there should be enough movement, particularly in your facial features, to keep people interested. But if you were standing, the tendency would be to shift from foot to foot, right? And that just results in seasickness for people who are watching you. It becomes a much less enjoyable experience. So to prevent that, I like for people to get very comfortable sitting and raising their energy in that position rather than use the techniques that they had used in the past when they were on stage.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. And I heard you explain this in another podcast, and I thought, well, here I am standing up, and because I have a sit-stand desk, and I find that I very rarely actually sit down at this desk.
Mhm.
I'll walk away, and I have another desk where I have reading material and writing material, and I often just go over there to sit down rather than at this desk where the computer screens are.
Yeah.
And to me, but I guess my presenting style is not one that I don't walk around a lot. I do walk consciously, and here I am rocking on my on my feet. But I tend to be a lot more stationary in presenting, except when the presentation actually benefits from it. So
Yeah.
I'm not the sort of person that paces up and down the stage when I'm presenting. And so I find I can actually stand there at the camera. I do make use of back and forth
Hmm.
You talked about depth earlier, and I think to me sometimes that adds something, but I'm very conscious of when I do that.
And that's
I don't.
ask, right? Is to be conscious of what you have around you, what your space looks like, and how people are perceiving it on the receiving end. If you are a person who has minimal foot to foot movement, you don't have that sort of nervous paciness, then by all means, stand. I don't want
Mm,
anybody to think that I'm saying you should sit all day long. I don't do that. No one does that. No one should do that. But what we are trying to do is eliminate extraneous movement that can
mm,
become confusing to a viewer or fatiguing to a viewer, and mitigate that with movement that is purposeful and has and emphasizes your point, right? So
mm.
if that is moving forward to back or giving some hand gesticulation, which I do a lot, and that means on screen raising your hands higher than
Yeah,
your
yeah.
body, right? It's understanding what the field of view is on a person's receiving end and conscientiously using that to your advantage.
I think there's a word you said there that I think is really important, and that's purposeful. Doing whatever it is you're doing with volition. And I sometimes I've been in speeches, in live speeches, and I think to myself, I wish the person would stand still for a moment, or I wish they'd stop, doing these movements that they're just doing them all the time. It's obviously a habit that they've built, but it is almost distracting from their message rather than adding to their message. So I think doing things with purpose to reinforce the message is the key.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right. So in terms of kind of appearing as yourself and being natural on camera, then because a lot of people, there's lots of discussion around, do you script things, do you use a bullet point, do you just memorize your speech and present it from memory? What's your view on those things, and what are some of the tips you have for just kind of being natural on camera as if you were on stage?
Such a great question. Some of this, I'll be honest, it takes practice. And like any delivery of any new thing that you are involved in, it takes practice to become comfortable. But I will go back to that cycloptic eye of the camera. And this actually just happened last week during a presentation of the Work from Home Masterclass, where at the end, someone asked me, did you memorize the entire hour? Because you looked at me the whole time. And I never saw you look at your slides or your notes. Like, how did you do that? For me, I don't like to memorize everything. I feel that it takes away the natural flow of the way that I present or the conversational style that people have come to anticipate and look forward to when they're in a room with me. So for me, I don't like to memorize everything. However, I do know my material, just as
Mm,
anyone should if they're presenting in front of a group, right? They should know their material, especially if you are not going to look at the screen. Now, there's nothing wrong with glancing down to see where you are, right? We all need to pace ourselves and make sure that we're presenting the right thing at the right time. However, what I think is even more important is, again, think about who is watching you and what they're going to get out of the experience with you. There's a lot of ways in which we can appear disengaged from what we're doing on screen simply because of the angle of the camera or the angle of our gaze. That's why that Cyclops eye is your best friend. So if it
mm,
takes that you need to put a post-it note with an arrow on it and the word smile on top of your camera's Cyclops, then by all means do it. Or put a picture that makes you laugh so that your facial expression comes to life. We all have that resting bee face. It doesn't matter who you are,
mm,
especially if you're on Zoom calls all the live long day. It's very easy for your face to just fall. You're tired and it shows,
mm,
right? We don't want that to happen if we are the presenter. We also don't want that to happen if we're an avid listener or in the group and we're paying attention to the material, because it looks disengaged. It looks like you're just
mm,
not interested. So whatever cues you can provide to yourself, with that camera to ensure that you're smiling, or you're remembering something funny that gives you a restful and alert expression. The world needs more alerts, so be alert. That is a very helpful thing to do. And then also use your peripheries. I promise this is the last movie that I'll quote, but you remember in 40-Year-Old Virgin when they go out to the club and the protagonist's friend says, use your peripheries. We don't want you to don't scan the room. You just use your peripheries.
Yeah.
Figure out who's around you. Use your peripheries when you are presenting on screen. My camera is at eye level, which gives me a very clear line of sight to your eyes. And it should feel like I'm engaging with you directly. In reality, your face is about 4 inches below the camera. So I would love to look directly at your face, but if I do that, then it appears I'm looking down. It could look like I'm checking my phone. It could look like I'm doing something with the keyboard. It could look like I'm reading text messages. The point being, when your eyes divert from gazing to the audience, it looks like you're not paying attention to the audience. So it's really important to me.
That's something that I certainly struggle with, particularly on a meeting. And I know I'm doing it now because I'm watching you, and there's about about a 30 centimeter gap between the camera lens and where you are on the screen, even though I've positioned you right at the top of the screen underneath the camera.
Yeah, which is a great trick. I try and get it as close to the camera as possible. And if I need to refer to my screen, then I would raise my computer so it's really butting up against the bottom of my camera, so that when I divert my gaze, it's as minimal as possible.
And the other thing that I think the point you made that is really important, I think, is having the camera at eye level. There's what's it called, nostril cam, where people have their laptop on the desk, and of course the 13-inch screen, so it's only about 8 inches or so high. So that's where the camera is, which is typically at about chest level,
Right.
and so they're looking down at the camera. I'm always amazed. The news broadcasts recently, we watch these news where they switch over to, for example, a finance expert, or a what else do they have? They're mainly the finance experts. So they talk to various different experts on aspects of finance or aspects of the unemployment numbers, what's going on in the economy right now. And a lot of those people have exactly that. They're sitting at a desk, they've got a laptop there in front of them. Apart from the audio, sometimes they're in an echo chamber and there's sort of this echoing and rustling. So they've got their notes and they're rustling their notes in front of the microphones, but they're looking down at the camera. And I think, oh gosh, if these news people who are in television, if they bring experts on, why don't they give them some coaching on how to do remote camera work properly?
Agree. You're right. And it's always the FI guys. I don't know why that is, but I've seen that too. And I just feel like if you're in financial, please call me. We can do some training and help your folks to present better, because when you're dealing with a subject matter expert, and even if you're not, let's just say that you're on a group call, but if you are presenting yourself on screen, the camera angle is equivalent to your gaze. And that's what I want people to understand, is that there's a lot of psychology and a lot of subconscious cues that we pick up, to go back to the beginning of our conversation. So many subconscious cues that we deliver to people, they pick up and make decisions about our attitude, right? If you're looking down at someone, or if somebody is looking down at you, what will you be predisposed to imagine? How much respect do you think that they have for the conversation for you? How comfortable do you feel? Do you feel subordinate, superior? And if you're looking up at the camera, a lot of people think that's a great technique because it makes you look younger. But is that really what you want? in
Yeah.
a business scenario where you are the expert and aiming to gain people's trust. So, we talk a lot, again, there's a whole training on this because it is very subtle, but we think it's very subtle, but when in practice we see it being used, we think, oh my gosh, like this is dreadful, and people don't realize it. And to your point about sound quality, we are really unaware, most of us at this point, about what it takes to deliver a high quality of sound when we're on camera, especially for experts who are delivering important information, right?
Mm.
Think about what your end goal is. Think about how you'd like to be perceived. Know that all of the training that you have had to this point in your career has been great for IRL or in real life situations, but has been unlikely to cover the difference between IRL and on camera appearances.
Mm. So tell us a little bit more about your masterclass then. What do you cover there, and what kind of things can people learn?
So the masterclass is something I'm extremely excited about. Being a person who has spent a considerable amount of time on the corporate side, as well as on the digital entrepreneur side, it feels, I mentioned this to you before, kind of like a perfect storm of where the skills that I've developed converge and are helpful to people right now. What we do in the work from home masterclass is we cover everything from styling your work from home space, setting it up, how to choose your space so that it is effective in your home and effective in your work and home life, because it is still your home. Nobody expects it to be otherwise, but we do
Mm.
want you to feel comfortable, confident, professional when you're using it for that purpose. How to set it up so that it is functional for you, but also impressive, comfortable, exuding your personal brand. And personal is important here, not just professional, when you are on camera. And then we talk about how to style your work from home style. So, your brand as a person. How do you choose color? How do you understand the garments that work well on screen and the reason why some work well and some don't work well, and how that could affect the way that you are perceived when you are on the job? I mean, if you are interviewing, or if you are meeting an important client, or you're delivering important information, you're standing in front of a crowd or sitting in front of a crowd, these are all the subliminal, visual, nonverbal aspects of your communication that make up 55% of how people believe you, right?
Mm.
So it's it's really a lot more important than people might have thought when we started to work in the lockdown. But it does affect people's perception and the believability of your communication. It's very much worth the detailed look. So I have been offering that up until this point. It's going to go evergreen very soon, but not quite yet. In the meantime, what I think would be really helpful for listeners today is to pick up my freebie, which you can get at tamaraglick.com/InnovaBuzz podcast. And that is the 15 video call spoilers and how to fix them freebie. It's a really practical, tactical, immediately useful list of things that you can do to affect change in your space right now.
Mm. Okay, well, that's fabulous. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes, of course. So I'm just cognizant of the time here, and think that's a good point to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field with some tips from your experience. We've already got lots of tips, but these are very specific questions, and they're designed that hopefully your answers will inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result. So the first one, what do you think the number one thing is anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
In this climate, I'll sound like a broken record, but in this climate, I think that your greatest opportunity for innovation is how you show up as a personal brand in this new realm. And that is because it will affect the way that you manage staff or groups, as well as how you come forward with your ideas and your thought leadership. So it's a new way of presenting yourself and your ideas. And I think that's the greatest area of innovation right now, is using that technology and space to your advantage.
Hmm. Great. I love that. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of things that can be done around innovation there to be consistent with your persona and your brand, as you've mentioned, and you've talked a lot about ideas throughout our conversation today. So, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Ooh, I think really listening to I'm a zeitgeisty person, listening to the zeitgeist, listening to the things that people are encountering and understanding what the struggle is, and knowing that there are ways that my knowledge base can impact positively the struggle that people are having. So it's really paying attention to who your client is and what they're experiencing. That has always been the way that I've innovated my business, is really understanding the problems that my clients are facing and finding solutions to help them.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that, and it's really about the service-based philosophy and culture that we talked about right from the beginning, and then listening and understanding what problems are there that I have some experience that I can help with. So I love it. All right. Now, do you have a favorite resource you use most often?
In terms of creativity or in terms of innovation?
Yeah, either
Hmm.
or just general to help your business.
Oh my goodness, there's a few things. Obviously, social media. Maybe not obviously, but you can certainly find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I love those platforms. Conversation happens there, and that has been a really great way to connect with more people. So that is something that I find really useful as a resource to my business. And I think also changing the lens, so finding ways to be creative about how you see things, or putting in practice structure to help your creativity on a regular basis. So I think a lot of people think creativity is this like burst of inspiration and you go from there. But I believe that creativity is partially that. Yes, you can have that eureka moment, but it usually comes because you have structure in place to assist your creative juices on a daily basis. So one of the resources that I love for that is Twyla Tharp's book. It's called The Creative Habit. And I always keep it right above me. It's a brilliant book about creating structure so that creativity can flow and new solutions can be found.
Yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful book, and we'd had the privilege of speaking with Twyla some time back. I can't remember off the top of my head now which episode, but if you check out or if you search for Twyla Tharp on the InnovaBuzz podcast, you'll find it.
She's incredible.
I love it. Yeah. All right. And yeah, social media, you said something there that I think is really important, and that's having conversations on social media. I like to say it's called LinkedIn, not selling, and encourage people to let's have conversations there and meaningful conversations and build relationships. And that might lead to sales later on, but it's the no like trust factor that you referred to very early on.
Absolutely. That's what social is for. It's not a monologue, it should be a dialogue.
Mm. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
For me, it is regular check-in. So when I'm working with clients, it's usually on a longer term basis. They'll begin with one aspect of a service and then we roll into another and then maybe into another. But keeping a client on track, there's that accountability factor that only exists when you're working in partnership with a coach, right? As opposed to,
Mm.
here are great tools. Thanks very much. I'll go and apply the tools. You will inevitably get to a point where you need a new tool, right? You've exhausted the usefulness of the tools, or you've come into contact with a problem or a new situation where that tool doesn't seem to apply. So keeping a regular accountability cycle with my clients is the best way to keep them on track. I love to see what they're doing. I love to see the check-ins, success. I love to see their success. So if we can maintain that open communication over a period of time, I find that my clients get the best results and the most sticky results in that kind of a relationship.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that accountability part of coaching, and it's often overlooked or not not paid enough attention to, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. All right. And what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Well, develop your personal brand. Figure out how you are different. To me, a personal brand isn't what you do. And really, nobody hires you for what you do. They hire you because of how you do it. So, figuring out what your values are, figuring out how you do the thing you do, and the reason why people come back to you again and again to do it. These are the foundations of your personal brand in many ways. So, to me, that's the most important thing is figure out what your values are, figure out how you do what you do, and the reason why people come back to you over and over again, their experience of you, and utilize that information, because it's really hard to see that when if you're inside the bottle. How do you see the bottle, right?
Yeah.
So having that feedback and understanding the difference that you make in other people's lives, that can really help you to differentiate yourself in terms of your personal brand.
Yeah, I love the bottle analogy. Yeah, get outside the bottle so you can actually see it.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Well, this has been absolutely fabulous, Tamara. Now, you mentioned the site before where the freebie is, the 14 tips to help you be, really engaging online and working remotely. So give us that link again, and also tell us where people can find out more about all of your work and what you do, and perhaps even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared with us today.
Absolutely. So, to get your freebie, which is the 15 video call spoilers and how to fix them freebie, just go to tamaraglick.com/InnovaBuzz podcast, and you can pick it up right there. You'll also, enroll onto my email list, and I'll let you know what's going on with the work from home masterclass and any other new products or services that are coming out to help you to innovate your personal brand and your thought leadership. And you can also find me obviously at that website, but on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time. You can find me with my name, or on Instagram, and my handle there is Tamara Glick, all one word.
Wonderful. And we'll have links to all of those in the show notes, of course. So do you have some parting advice you'd like to leave the listener with today?
I would love to let the listeners know that getting a grip on all of this new stuff, it does take a little time, and it is new. So don't be upset if you've realized that, oh my goodness, I've been making some cardinal mistakes and I didn't know.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a lot of information, but it can actually be really quick and easy to implement once you understand the effect of what is happening. And that's what coaching is all about. That's why I've developed these services, because I know that unless somebody points it out to you, you really won't know. And your audience probably won't tell you because they respect and like you, and they don't want you to feel any kind of way, right? So the best thing to do is say, all right, this is new. I haven't had to do this before. And now is a great time to put myself into the beginner's mindset and learn how. So don't feel frustrated if it's been tough going up to this point. It has been for the great many of us, but there is help, and it does get easier once you know what to look for and how to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, great advice. And also just get out there and do more. And as you observe, I mean, one of the things that I talked about, a few things today that I've observed other people doing on Zoom calls, for example. So if you see things that you find frustrating, annoying, or detract from the message that other people are doing on the Zoom calls, just think about some of the things that Tamara's shared with us today and reflect on those, because then you can make changes to your own appearance or the way you do things on those calls, so that you don't have that happening to other people when they look at you. All right. And finally, Tamara, who else should I get on this show and why?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you asked. Well, first of all, I do want to shout out to Christina Torres one more time, because that was a brilliant connection and lovely of her to make it. I would suggest there's a couple people to get in touch with. I would love for you to have a conversation with Nia Lee of Socially Media. She is an incredible expert on Instagram, particularly how to use video on Instagram, because video is a key marketing tool for 2020 and going forward. She's wonderful. And another person I think that would be fantastic to chat with is Meiki Tsang, who is a podcast coach. She teaches people how to construct their key topics for being a great podcast guest and how to approach podcasters to get onto their podcasts.
Oh, that sounds fascinating, both of those topics. I'm really interested in learning more about both of them. So Mia for the video coaching on Instagram in particular, and then
and Meiki for podcasting.
Meiki for podcasting, yeah. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about now is, and we do some things to help people get on podcasts as guests. And one of the things I'm really passionate about, so I'm really looking forward to chatting with Meiki, is not just the logistics of getting the pitch and landing the podcast guest appearance, but also having the person show up as their best and really prepare them. So love that there are other people doing that kind of training online, because I don't think there's that many doing it. So thanks for those suggestions, and thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today, Tamara. I've really enjoyed this, learned a lot, started practicing more looking at the camera here, which is quite a challenge. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with my audience when we go live. So thanks again, all the best, and please do stay in touch.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, wasn't that a delightful and insightful conversation with Tamara? I hope you found something of value in what she shared with us. There were so many valuable tips that she shared about showing up on camera in a work-from-home environment that is both personable and yet professional. I'd love to know what you took away from Tamara's episode. Leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Tamara Glick. That is TAMARAGLICK. All lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Tamara Glick. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Tamara there, as well as links to her website, her social media pages, and the other resources we spoke about in our conversation today. Tamara suggested we have a conversation with Nia Lee of Social E-Media and podcast guesting strategist Meiki Tsang on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So Nia and Meiki, keep an eye on your inboxes for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Tamara Glick. Tune in again to the next episodes of the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we've got even more fantastic guests lined up, including Simon Severino of Strategy Sprints and leadership consultant and author of Visual Leadership, Todd Churches. Thanks for listening to this episode. Make sure you subscribe to the show to be reminded of new episodes. It's free to subscribe. Leave a review if you like. Even if you don't like me, I'm okay with that. I'm asking you to leave a review because it helps other people find this show. Go to innovabiz.co to join our marketing transformation community and access a free gift my team and I made for you. It's the Marketing Master Mini Class. We want to give you everything you need to transform your marketing into a human-centered, relationship-focused growth engine. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.